So by the time you see this, the release of Assassin's Creed Shadows will be imminent. It might even have happened. And to celebrate that, Ubisoft has put out a blog post explaining how they managed to cram such an ambitious game designed for current generation consoles onto Nintendo's console hybrid. There's a lot of detail going on here, which I found fascinating, just to see how they've managed to do it. A few surprises, a few things that we'd kind of discerned already from the original trailer. But Alex, what do you make about this?
Well, this is interesting because it is a current gen only game that had many kind of current gen only things in it that would really only work with a modern GPU, with a pretty fast CPU. I mean, the game did eventually, it has two modes at least. You can target 60 or 30 if you have like a PS5. But still, it was very heavy. And you could see that just by running the PC version. Things like fluid simulations for leaves and snow, ray traced global illumination in the game, in that 30 FPS mode on console, and a virtualized geometry system for a lot of the game's static objects, much like Nanite.
Yeah.
And these are all things that the blog doesn't enlighten us about completely, but it does give us a sense of how they did bring all those heavy features to the Switch 2. One of the things they do mention is that the Switch 2 does support RTGI, like it could run it, but they opted to use the game's standard baked global illumination with probes. And the interesting part is they specifically say they did it mainly for RAM memory reasons. And I don't know exactly if they mean storage, as in like how much space they have in RAM, or if they meant speed, like how fast it is, like bandwidth, for example. It's hard to know from a sentence like that. They do mention things like tweaking LODs. They mention how they specifically in handheld mode reduce things that would be much heavier on the GPU, because CPU, they're actually much more or less the same, maybe even a little better in terms of clocks there on the Switch 2 in handheld mode, but you've got much less GPU to work with there. So they're reducing strategically there. And I think the kind of last really interesting thing is that they do mention using DLSS explicitly. And that hasn't been something that has been mentioned by a lot of developers, I would say, ultra explicitly in like a blog post. Sometimes it's like a small technical detail somewhere, but here they actually directly call it out. And I find that very fascinating. And I'm very curious to see which version of DLSS it will be using, whether it's using the heavier model that is more like the PC one from the CNN model, or if it's going to be that more switch to custom one that is lighter, but maybe less effective for certain screen elements. We won't know until we have hands on it. With it, but I think that's fantastic. It's going to look at least really good. I presume this is going to target 1080p based upon the pre-release footage so far, but it's already looking pretty fantastic in the little preview footage that they have here on their blog.
Mm-hmm. Interesting also that they're talking about their own bespoke algorithm for VRR in order to still maintain VRR at 30 frames per second, which is an interesting comment, because we've kind of assumed that this would be taken care of automatically by low frame rate compensation in 120 hertz mode. John, I'd really like to get to the bottom of what VRR options are actually available to developers here, because it's not clear, is it?
Yeah, it's really not. And it did. So yeah, we were operating under this assumption that if you were in a 120 hertz container, that you would actually get this, because we know from experience that when you're at 60 hertz, due to the way VRR works, obviously there is a floor, a 40 hertz floor at best. Because if you go below that, then you're actually ending up with like flicker, right? Because you wouldn't have enough headroom in your container to actually double up the frames, which is what low frame rate compensation is usually about here. But I guess that the Switch 2 doesn't handle it as smoothly as we might have thought when doing that. So obviously, I think they're going to have to be outputting at 120 hertz in portable mode, which won't be a problem because the screen is so smeary anyway. You won't get the double image effect. And then they've done something to ensure that you get the full scale of VRR, which this is what G-Sync has provided it specifically, right? Like the whole point with G-Sync was like the full range, like all the way up and down in terms of the refresh rate. And that's
what you would assume.
We just assumed that it would work, but the way they specify that the way they specify this as something that they had to add themselves suggests that maybe the SDK currently doesn't do this for you.
Yeah, so I wonder if it's the screen has like a 40 to 120 range. I've seen cheap LCDs that have like a 40 to 120 range when they're FreeSync LCDs. And I wonder if maybe it's that. And so they have to manually, because it's not going to be going down to like 30 hertz or something like that. Maybe they have to actually manually add in frame doubling, which is what it sounds like based upon that sentence. Maybe if we do get the chance to talk to the developer directly, which I hope we do get the chance, and have it inform maybe our coverage of this game, maybe we could press them on that, as well as DLSS, because these are a lot of question marks over the Switch 2, which we still don't have a lot of great information about, right?
Pretty much,
but
yeah.
I will say, though, the good thing about VR here is that it will give them a little bit of extra leeway to allow for some very minor drops in portable mode, which might allow them to scale up the visuals closer to docked mode when in this mode configuration. So, but hopefully it doesn't go too low. Mm-hmm. Like 28, 27 FPS for a short bit, not a big deal with VRR, but if you start to go lower than that, you get into PAL territory or worse. It's not good.
Yeah, it would add borders, John.
Yeah, no, you have to add the borders.
Going like this. I'm also interested to hear about, if we do talk to them, I would love to know more about how they brought the virtual geometry system over.
Yep.
Because we have yet to see Nanite running, for example, on any of the UE5 Switch 2 ports. There haven't been that many, but there hasn't been from all of them.
Which Switch? I forget. So I guess the Chronos, the New Dawn, does that use Nanite?
None of them
doesn't.
Was there any Switch 2 UE5 game that actually has Nanite as a main feature, aside from Fortnite, which obviously that has a different focus?
Yeah. This is Chronos and Fortnite, basically.
So what I was asking is, does Chronos have Nanite on other systems?
Yes.
Okay, so that is an example of a game where they sacrifice that feature. Got it.
And I think you said, Alex, in your piece with Oliver, that Fortnite isn't using Nanite on Switch 2.
Yeah, which is really bizarre, actually, because I am very curious to see as to why, because it's running fine. Like, it's running fine at a reasonably high resolution. And I wonder if there's something else that we just don't know about behind the scenes, not allowing that to be the case. But here, they're also their version of Nanite here for this game was a little bit different in the aspect of a lot of the triangle size, since they designed the game in a more cautious manner, not just throwing triangles at everything. They were, as strange as that sounds, but they didn't necessarily, I imagine the reasons why they could have done that is because they're not sure if they would have finished their virtual geometry system time originally for what their original release date was. The game was delayed quite a bit, if I recall. And who knows, but they designed a lot of the assets with like larger triangle sizes in general. And so the way Nanite works is it splits between a compute shader, rasterizing, geometry when it's a certain screen size, more or less. And then mesh shaders actually do the rest when it's above a certain amount of pixels real estate. And with the debug views that they sent to me, you could see that a whole ton of the game's triangles were actually done with mesh shaders, which is really interesting because that means it's not actually pushing a lot of compute, which actually may be better for a device like Switch 2, which has mesh shader support. Arguably, though, not a whole bunch of compute in comparison to its big console brothers and sisters. So, I think this could be really interesting if they did port it as they did. But if they didn't, that would also be a bit concerning. So we'll have to see.
Yeah. Just looking at the blog post here, a couple of features that have been added that I think are either quite amusing or actually quite useful. I particularly like the Switch-specific features here. The Nintendo Switch 2 system version of Assassin's Creed Shadows brings fresh and dynamic ways to dive into the game. Touchscreen navigation makes interacting with menus, maps, and the hideout more intuitive than ever. So I actually scrolled down at that point because I wanted to find the fresh and dynamic ways to dive into the game, but that's it. You get like an interactive map, which is nice, but maybe overcooking that somehow. The feature that I actually really, really like is, pretty much all Ubisoft games, you can actually move your save game across to any other platform, cross-platform saves. So with Switch, with any kind of handheld specifically, that's pretty awesome, right? Because you can be playing this on your PlayStation 5. No need to wait for a PS6 handheld to come along. Just use your Switch 2 and carry on your progress and migrate that progress back to your PlayStation 5 when you're back home. I think this is awesome.
There is a caution there. I mentioned it before, but some versions of these games have additional content that you may not have had in the original, like Star Wars Outlaws. If you said the base game on PS5 and then you want to migrate your save to Switch, because it has extra content in it, it won't allow it unless you also own the content on the PS5.
Yeah, they're talking about that also in terms of Assassin's Creed Shadows on the Switch 2. All title updates released to date will be available at launch on Nintendo Switch 2 with the exception of the Claws of Awaji. The Claws of Awaji expansion.
Really?
Yeah.
Dang.
It's coming out later at
My
some
favorite.
point.
The Claws of
Your
Awaji.
favorite Claws of Awaji?
Okay, well, we're going to be all over this one because, man, this game looks great, and we really do need a palate cleanser after Tomb Raider 2013.
Oh my goodness, that could have been a DF
Oh
Direct
my
topic in
gosh.
its own right. That was ridiculous. Just even seeing Oliver posting Tom posting screenshots about that. My
Yep.
goodness.
Man, I think the thing that really sort of caused a Roger Moore-esque eyebrow raise was the fact that it's 1080p on both and 60 FPS, both docked to the mobile mode, which kind of suggests that they're not doing anything with the docked mode at all. The extra
It's easier.
crazy stuff. But yeah, that was certainly an interesting piece of content there. I'm not sure I've ever seen a current gen game that doesn't have features that the PS3 version had. That was a first.
The triple stays winning.
Yep.
Well,
And the Xbox 360 for that matter. As it has the same-
We're not doing geometry here, Rich. Come on.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah.